Hi, my name is Owen.
Hi, I'm Eli,
And you're listening to the Creeper Show.
That's what happened to me when I first saw that thing that I saw. I had no idea what it was. I hadn't heard of Bigfoot. I didn't know about cryptid, nothing like that. I mean, I'm in the northwest of England, for God's sake. I shouldn't be seeing anything. But what I saw that day has lasted, and it's still a daily thing for me. And in the beginning, it was about just proving that I hadn't lied. It did happen. I don't know what he was. I didn't know what he was. He looked like a man and an ape that had been pushed together somehow in some way.
This is the Cryptid Creature Show. I am Brian, and with me as always, my co-host Todd. What's up, buddy?
Brian, my friend, we got a lot to cover tonight, man. We just got back from the Crypticon in Lexington a couple weekends ago.
Yeah.
That was a great time, man. We met a lot
Always
of cool
fun.
people. Had a lot of our guests come up and say hello. And we had a few kids come up and hang out and get on the mic.
Yeah, that was fun.
And do a couple little cool things. I want to give a shout out to Ella, Eli, Aiden, and Gunner. Thanks, guys, for coming up. And
right. Thanks, guys. That was fun.
With us, yeah. Also want to give a shout out to Dustin. Dustin came up and was talking to us. He was looking for a Dogman shirt. Dustin, you know what we're talking about, brother.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for your purchases. We went on and designed some shirts.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I got some shirts and some hats designed. We needed some Dogman gear, and I'm glad he came up and talked to us. So now we got some Dogman gear on the website if you guys want to check it out.
And we can do that. And we can do that. If you don't see something on the website that you like, let us know, man.
We can design
we'll see if we can get it.
You want.
Yeah, we'll get it fixed up for you.
Yep. So we're glad we could help out. And now I'm happy we got Dogman stuff. So that was really cool.
Me
Dustin,
too.
Thanks again, man. Darren is our latest yearly member on the website for membership.
Yes.
Members episodes. Darren, thank you so much.
We appreciate you, Darren. Thank you, man.
The show, man. I'm gonna give a shout out to him. And remember too, I want to say, and we haven't said this in a while, if you guys have had an encounter and you want to come on the show, or you just want to talk to us, or just leave it, go to our website, leave it at Share Your Story, cryptidcreatures.net. You can email us from there too. Check everything out. Check out our Patreon too. You guys can become members on there as well. So thanks everyone for that. It was great meeting you guys. All the past guests that come up and talk to us.
Yeah, man. Always fun.
Jeff, Patty. Gosh, we met Travis Walton again. Lyle Blackburn
Travis
again.
is always cool. And join us next year. It'll be fun.
So before we bring on our guest tonight, who is Debra Hatswell from the UK.
From the UK.
She has BBR Investigations.
In fact, we have some of her stuff on our YouTube channel.
We do.
You should go check it out and like and subscribe while you're there.
Yeah, we're just talking about everything, aren't we? These guys want to hear the encounter. But before we do that, you want to do some cryptid trivia?
Cryptid trivia. Bring it.
Brought to you by the Cryptid Creatures Podcast. In the year 1967, the famous Patterson-Gimlin film was filmed.
Right.
What other cryptid-related incident happened in that same year, 1967?
Interesting.
Want to think about that while we do the show, and then see if you can guess. We'll bring Debra on. You ready?
Yep. Let's get her.
Debbie, you are a writer, a fan of folklore and myth, and the owner of BBR Investigations. Can you tell us a little bit about the BBR Investigations?
That started way back, a long time ago now. BBR Investigations was actually British Bigfoot research, because in the early days, I was only interested in finding people in the UK and Europe that had seen a Bigfoot type creature. But over the years, I realised that people were seeing lots of other cryptids and experiencing the paranormal and the strange. So about 5 years ago, I changed the name and I branched out because I realised that so many people were actually being turned away or not listened to. And I've had 40 years of that, so I know how to deal with that. So that's my skill set. So we've gone from being a very small company, just based in the northwest of England, to a global company now. We have people all over the world. So what we tend to do is a case will come in, I will then look for an investigator in that area that would cover, say, Bigfoot or the paranormal or whatever the actual genre was. I'd put the witness in touch with them, and then they investigate the case. And we have cases like that happening everywhere, really.
Okay, I see. So then how do you report on them? Do you guys tell the story?
I usually let the witness control that when we get in touch with the beginning. So if they just want it to be private and they don't want anybody to know, then we do that. But if they want to share it, they might not want to be on camera. So I'll interview them, possibly, and just use the audio. Or I'll read out what they've written, if that's how they prefer. And it's different. I've noticed a change. In the beginning, I had to read everything out. But now it seems, and I think it's the same in America and Canada, there seems to be a big increase in the reports that are coming in and how people are being treated. So there's a lot more respect out there than there used to be. Especially when there's shows like this, where you can come on and you can sit in a comfortable environment and you can just share what happened to you without judgment. The world needs more of this, I have to say. And that tends to be what I do. So this week alone, I've interviewed a number of people on camera that are speaking about, for some, one gentleman was 88 and he was speaking about an experience that happened just 4 weeks ago to him. That absolutely terrified him. If you can imagine, seeing something at your window when you're that age is not going to let you sleep well at night. So I was actually in hospital when it happened, and I managed to ring him and speak to him and kind of quieten it down. But it wasn't a Bigfoot creature that he saw. What he saw, he referred to as a werewolf, like a dogman type creature. They seem to be enormously on the increase. I mean, I used to take probably one a year or something like that in the early days, especially in the UK. But recently we have a lot of what I'd class as a historical report. So maybe someone saw something when they were a teen, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, or something like that. And I spoke with a gentleman, I've just been working on his audio, where he's in his 50s and he's finally coming forward with things that have happened to him in younger life. And that seems to be happening more and more, which is amazing, because the more people come out and share, we tend to get another person that will share on off the back of that, as you Americans say. So it seems to be dovetailing outwards. And sometimes they'll rethink an event. So something that maybe was reported 20 years ago to the paranormal, say, for instance, we have a 7-foot hairy ape-like creature that's seen walking away. In the UK, in the 70s and 80s, that would get reported as a paranormal ape or a paranormal creature. So they'll then hear something and think, hang on a minute, that's what happened to me. When I first saw that thing that I saw, I had no idea what it was. I hadn't heard of Bigfoot. I didn't know about cryptid, nothing like that. I mean, I'm in the northwest of England, for God's sake. I shouldn't be seeing anything. But what I saw that day has lasted. I'm 56 now, and it's still a daily thing for me. And in the beginning, it was about just proving that I hadn't lied. It did happen. But also about getting answers for myself. And there wasn't an internet back then, so I couldn't jump online and realise that these things were seen from Washington State all the way to Florida, or learn about patterns and routes that they would take and foraging routes. I had to learn all of that over the years. And I was really lucky. I had some really good teachers, some American teachers that taught me everything. But back then at 15, I don't know what he was. I didn't know what he was. He looked like a man and an ape that had been pushed together somehow in some way. Was hair covered. I only saw him from about mid-chest up, so I couldn't tell you about arms or legs or anything like that. He was completely hair covered other than his face. He had some whiskery, what we call bum fluff in the UK, like when a young man just started to grow a beard in and it's not complete. I wouldn't have said he was much older than me, for all his skin was leathery and he looked like he lived in the old. He wasn't a caveman, he wasn't a gorilla, he wasn't anything. He's always been the man ape to me. I've always called him the man ape. But later years, as I grew up and I started researching, I realised that there is a case in America in Sykesville of the Sykesville monster. And a number of witnesses were interviewed there after seeing a creature, and they sat down with a police artist. And between all of them, they came up with a photo of the creature that we'd seen. And I was at home with my husband, probably about 2010, something like that. And I came across it on the screen, and I I don't know, it was almost like going back there. It must have been almost PTSD. I was crying, I was upset. And he knew about it. He knew about what had happened, but I'd never gone into great deal because I'd always done BBR on the sidelines, you know, for most of my life. And in 2006, I had an accident and that meant I couldn't work anymore. So I was able to do it full time, but I still wouldn't do it in my own name. I was still hiding behind a name. And I was, you know, at that time, I wouldn't even have recorded my voice. It was just written work that I did. And seeing that Sykesville monster changed things for me because my husband said, right, Deb, you've got to do something. You've either got to run at it and solve it like you do everything else, or you just got to put it away. And we just can't talk about it anymore because I wasn't going on holiday, I wasn't camping anymore, I wasn't out, you know, fishing and doing all of the things that I live to do. I wasn't doing it. I was too terrified to do it. So at that point I thought, yeah, he's right. My girls are grown. It's time to run at it, you know, with two hands. And here I am now, all these years later.
Can you tell us about where you saw the Bigfoot creature and what you were doing, what was going on, the encounter?
Yeah, I shouldn't have seen it. It's absolutely impossible that I saw it. And I don't blame anybody that doesn't believe me. And I've said that all along. I didn't live in the wilds of the countryside. I don't live thousands of miles from anywhere. It was a small country park, but it's on a river valley. And as we know now, all these years after, cryptid creatures tend to follow the river valleys because the food, the protein follows the river valleys. And I think it had something to do with that. There's a lot of mine tunnels and things under the area I saw it. I didn't know that then. That came with later. But it was probably May, quite warm, nice day, about 1:30 in the afternoon. And we don't have, in England, you finish school at 16, so you don't really have the kind of college that you have in America. You finish school at 16 and you go to work or you go to college. So I'd have been about 15. We'd done our exams. I didn't want to go in. So I met my friend outside the park and I said, I'm not going in this afternoon. And she said, no, I'm not either. So we, as you guys say, we played hooker. We went to this old country mansion that had been abandoned. First building that went on the land there was the 14th century. And it was all boarded up. It wasn't used for anything. It was ruined. It was absolutely ruined. And they'd let the ivy grow so big and tall that we used to hide in there. So we'd dip in there. And I realised that in rhododendrons, you can see out, but you can't see in. And the amount of times now I take a Bigfoot report where they mention rhododendrons, it floors me every time. But I didn't know that then. We lay down like this. She's here, I'm here, and we're talking. And I noticed something out of the corner of my eye and I thought it was going to be a teacher. And we were in trouble. But I didn't really get time to process the thought because he just leant forward out of the greenery like that. So it's almost like that, as if he was using the trees and the leaves somehow to hide himself, almost. And if he hadn't moved, I wouldn't have seen him. And I've got to be really honest, I acted without thinking. I locked eyes with him. And as I locked eyes with him, I pushed my friend to the ground so that he'd get her, and I ran. I was up and I was running. And I looked back to see if he was coming after me, and she was up and running in the other direction. And he just leant back into the green like this, and he was gone. He was completely gone. And he looked really big. I don't know how to get that into perspective. Compared to a man or a really big muscular man, was nothing to him. He was just built of muscle. I remember his muscles here and the muscles at the side of his head. He had a very pronounced brow ridge, quite a flattened nose like a boxer. No cheekbones really to speak of. A normal mouth, quite normal. No canine teeth or anything like that. Just normal teeth like a human, but much bigger. And it's his eyes I remember more than anything else. They were like an amber colour, like the stone a tiger's eye, like that. And it was a split second. It was me looking like I'm looking at you now. And then I was gone. I was up and I was gone. And I don't remember anything for about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, until I came to what you guys would call the freeway. And I obviously had to stop at that point. And I think reality set in at that point. I thought he was going to grab me and do something to me. I thought he was going to like reach out and get me or her and just do some awful things. I didn't process that though. It was years after that you process that and you think, actually, what did he do to scare me? He didn't do anything other than look at me. But that was primal enough for me. I was up and I was running. And I had to go back the next day. Still had to go to school the next day in the same area. And I was absolutely terrified. Tried telling my parents. Obviously, they didn't want to know, did they? They just said, oh, it was a homeless man, or, you know, you're just being hysterical, or you've seen something and got it wrong. It was a man in a suit, you know. It was an escaped gorilla from the. It wasn't any of those things. So I decided I'd have to find out what he was myself. And the only thing we had going for us back then in the northwest of England was CB radio. So my dad had a CB radio, and I got on that at 15. I lived right at the bottom of a transmitter that transmits right across the world called Winter Hill. And I got in that car, and that's what we did. I'd get on there and I'd ask truckers if they'd seen anything in the night. And I'd get some sketchy reports, or, you know, some paranormal reports. But every now and again, I'd get a road crossing where the person would speak about a wild man or an ape man or a gorilla man. You're forgetting back in the 80s, there was no word of Bigfoot in the UK. But I'd get the odd driver who were driving the roads at night really late, say driving through Scotland. On that road, there's only the one road that just winds through the Highlands, the same in Wales, and people were reporting bear-like upright creatures on two legs, or ape men, or cavemen. So I knew I was onto something, and I thought, how am I gonna remember all this information? So I got a map. I just got a big map, and I put it on the wall, and every time I found a report or I came across someone, I stuck a pin in the map and I wrote it up, and then that's how it started. And then obviously that's led to the interactive map that's online that people can access, because people want to go where cryptids are seen. Don't know why. It took me 35 years to go back, but some people like to go where they're seen. So I can say, right, well, you know, tell me your town and I'll tell you what's about around your town. And if you see anything, let me know. But I went back with the Finding Bigfoot team in 2015. And my husband stood where he would have been. So back as a kid, I would have said he was 10 feet tall, but seeing him compared to my husband, he's probably about 7 feet, 7.5, something like that. Still massive, but not as big as I thought he was.
The Sykesville Monster, I've seen that picture you're talking about, and we'll try to post that on our group page for the listeners when we drop this episode. But it's a Bigfoot, but it's different looking. It does look more, I want to say, like a person.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of, you know, you see the Bigfoot pictures or you see Bigfoot mock-ups or whatever online and whatnot, but this is different looking than I've ever seen. And it's a strange, like almost like it's the offspring of a gorilla and a woman having a baby or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. Almost a hybrid of the two. There was a lady 2 years after me. She was in her 30s in exactly the same place in the park. She didn't get in touch with me. She got in touch with Thomas Markham of the Crypto Crew about 30 years after my experience. Thomas had put my experience out in his blog, and she'd gotten in touch with him and said she was 30 and she saw him. It was winter for her, about 5:30 at night, so it was quite dark. But he was stood under a light in the park in the same place where I'd seen him. But she saw all of him. And she said he had a pot belly. His arms were past his knees. He was completely hair covered. He had male genitalia. And she said he just stood and looked at her like he did with me. He didn't do anything. He just looked at her. And she said she just grabbed the dog and ran. She was absolutely terrified. She described him as an ape and a man, an ape and a chimp washed together. That's how she said it. He looked like an ape and a chimp. And I've gone on to find other people, starting in the 1950s. And the last report was 2021, where someone had seen something walking through the snow. But I couldn't get an investigation team out. We couldn't look at prints. We couldn't do any of that. We just couldn't get into the area. It was the weather was so bad that year that we couldn't. So that's tangible. I can't say that I've got any concrete evidence of that. But certainly people over the years have reported seeing the same thing. And what's really strange, the later reports describe it as grey-haired. Now, what I saw was really dark brown, but had a kind of like a reddishy colour to it, like a red setter dog or something like that. So it was really dark, but you could see the auburn within it. But in the later reports from like 2005 onwards, he's described as grey and hairy, often seen in exactly that same part of the park. So I don't know. Well, was he a time slip? Was he? I don't know. I don't know what he was. He looked flesh and blood. He really did look flesh and blood. And I believe that what I saw was flesh and blood, but I just don't know. I don't know. Until he sits down and tells me what he is, I've got to keep my options open.
Don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. He's probably just been there his whole life, I guess, maybe.
I wonder if, well, I wondered that myself. I wonder if, and I think he's far more suited for this planet than I am, because I need a house and a car and clothing, and he doesn't need any of those things. You know, he's just already, he's there and he's out there. What if he is like a cousin or a brother or something down that hominid line? We just this year, we've already, last year we said that we know of all the hominids that walk the planet, and there's no more news going to come out. And then just last month, news came out that they found another hominid species that probably mated with Neanderthals. So if you've got different hominids moving around the world at the same time, that's how we were made, survival of the fittest. What if they've always been here, like the Native Americans tell us, at our side, always, and they just remain elusive because they're far more suited to this planet than we are, and we're kind of the barbaric ones in their eyes.
Yeah, that's a great point. Probably hit the nail on the head right there, honestly. They are more suited for this planet than we are. Which makes you wonder, makes you wonder if we're really we're meant to be here or somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, so can you tell us some about some of the most interesting interviews you've done for BBR and what you've heard?
Yeah, I'll give you a bit of a snapshot. Back in the early days when I was looking for other people, obviously, it's hard enough being in America and coming out and saying that you've seen this beast. You see the ridicule that people get. So to do it in England, in a really small town like I did, was hard because people had a lot to say about it. And a lot of that was that I was a liar. I was making it up for attention and things like that, or I was mentally ill. There was something physically, mentally wrong with me. So as I've worked through the years and I'm looking for people, I came across a lady called Charmaine Fraser. Now, her experience would be accepted because it's it's in Scotland, in the way out there where the loggers are. So it's quite a drive from what we would class as civilization. And her grandparents owned a farm there in the middle of nowhere, quite a remote farmhouse. So she's about 8. She's walking down the farm lane with the dog to go and get the post, as you do. And the dog suddenly reacts first, and she thinks it's probably a fox or something like that. And as she looks, she sees this creature that stood on the farmland holding a branch of the tree as if it's examining the leaf in some way. And she said, I was so glad that it didn't turn round because I didn't want to see its face. And obviously she up sticks and she ran back, as did the dog. But that set her on a journey just like mine. So now she's always worked in the mental health field because she's from the age of 8 has been told that it's in her head, she's made it up, it's for this, it's for that. And when we started to speak, we were finishing each other's sentences because she had all the same questions that I had. And we were talking about like family backgrounds and things like that. And she said that wasn't the only time she'd seen something on that land. There was another time when they were in the car driving in and it was dark and there was a humanoid shape that was standing on the farm track that was about 7 feet tall and seemed to have some kind of glow to its eyes. Now, whether that was the car lights that did that, we don't know. But what we've got is a witness describing a 7 foot tall humanoid shape with something going on in the eye area. And then another time when they were picking raspberries, they were out with the adults and there was this howl, this call, as she called it, that came from the valley. And all of the adults just kind of, right, come on, let's go back. It was almost like they were spooked, but they didn't speak about it. And then one day she was with her grandmother. And her grandmother said, can you see out there? And she's, yeah, why? She said, is that one of them ginger eyes? And she was like, what, Granny? Those ginger eyes, they're like a gingery colour in autumn. And her and her brother are like, what's a ginger eye? And she was like, those things that live out there. So it's almost like it was in a family, like they knew about it, but it wasn't really spoken about. Now, if I'd have said that about America, you'd have instantly thought that's a Sasquatch. But because it's England, you don't have a name to call it. So she called it the Wild Man. That was her. And we're still in touch now. I did an interview with her just a couple of months ago because we've always kept in touch because we had the same kind of background. So she set out looking for other people in Scotland that had seen anything like that. And she did find a number of reports, and once again, road crossing or where the creature is actually chasing deer across the road as if they are chasing them down to hunt them, kind of thing. And I have similar reports like that in England, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. So then I find a young chap who's about, well, I think he's probably the same age as me now, he's 40s or 50s, but back then he was 8.
Cryptid Creatures. Find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, it's Brian. Join me and my co-host Todd as we investigate those things that go bump in the night. We'll talk to real people who have had real face-to-face encounters.
There's 2 of them across the creek at the big rocks.
With cryptid beings, from Bigfoot to aliens to even demons. By the end, you'll be asking, do I believe? Cryptid Creatures.
Find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts.
He's in a similar place. His house is at the end there, and the rest of it's just fields and like woodlands and streams and rivers. He's in the kitchen one night. They're all waiting to watch How the West Was Won. So that was a big thing on a Sunday in the UK. We'd get the American mover. So you'd make a quick cup of tea and everyone would jump on the sofa and watch it. And that's what he was doing. And he said as he's making a cup of tea, the windows was steaming, condensation. And he noticed a face and thought it was his own, like a reflection of his own, until it leant forward at the window. And he said it was like a chimp and a boy pushed together, almost forced together somehow. And he sat down and he yawned it as quickly as he could. And those 2 stand out to me because they're children. So adults tend to be believed, but children don't. But when that child is in his 50s and he's still speaking to you about it, and he's still word for word, no matter how many times you have this conversation with him, he's still word for word. And he has all those questions that every witness has. Why me? Will I see it again? What was it? Where do they eat? What happens when they die? All of these questions that we have going through their head, we all have them. And you start to find other witnesses, and each one of those witnesses will have a tiny piece of that you've had. And then that's kind of happened for me. So I've gone, well, I'm not scared anymore. I can go back in. But the latest Bigfoot sighting in the UK was only in summer. And that chap is not happy to go back out again. And things have started happening around his home. Now we hear of this, where people have an experience with a cryptid creature and then things start to happen on the land at home. And he's not in a place where he's happy to talk about it at all. So I'll just work with him through it until he is. And then when he's ready to go back, I'll either go back in with him myself, or he'll go back in with an investigator. And we'll basically get him to investigate his own case, because that tends to, you give them the control back then. They're not as frightened. You know what I mean? When they think they're out there on their own and there's nobody they can speak to, that's the most terrifying part. And I say to him, no, we'll find someone that you can talk to, that you'll gel with. So I tend to try and put them with someone similar to them. So they've always got a contact there, like a buddy system. So they can, bounce ideas, come up with theories, do all of those things that you do when you're a witness to the impossible. And do it, as you said earlier, in a place where people don't mind you sharing it. So now in the UK, they're like, look, we want conferences, we want podcasts, we want to talk about these things that are happening, We can see the Americans doing it, we can see the Canadians doing it. So when they find out that there are actually reports here in the UK, they're absolutely overjoyed. And I know that sounds silly, but you suddenly think, I know what that is. I know what I saw now. I know what to do with this. I'm not the only person in the world that's experienced this thing. And it gives you a little bit of confidence, self-confidence back. And then that tends to, I don't want anybody like me who is stuck in 7 days a week because they won't go out in nature anymore. I grew up in nature. It was, my dad fished. We did all of the things that you're supposed to do, and I couldn't do it after that. I just refused to leave the town. My parents moved out further into the country and I refused to go with them. I just wouldn't do it. I was worried that he'd get me. I was absolutely terrified that he'd be behind every tree, like waiting to get me kind of thing. And that's never left me. That's still there.
You said, what do they do with their dead? Here in America, we have so much more wilderness than you guys do over there. I mean, It's understandable how we could never find anything, but what do they do there? I mean, where do they go?
Exactly. Where do they go? How is that even possible?
Mm-hmm.
And then the UK is a very strange place. Only actually less than 10% of the UK is urban. The rest of it, about 70% of it's farmland. And we have over 50 estuaries. So we tend to live in very little small towns, and then we have what we call greenbelt land. So that tends to be old mining land, things that they can't build on, that are left to nature. And we've got 15, 16 country, when I say they're called areas of national beauty. So that's like a huge forest that some of them you can't go in, you have to get permission to go in them because they're very old, or they might have something in there that is about to be extinct, so you can't. So people can think it's just impossible. There's no land out there for them whatsoever. So part of the mapping was to work out if there were these kind of routes, because I'd studied Bigfoot in America. And when you look at America as a whole and you look at the 3 mountain ranges, Bigfoot sightings cluster along those mountain ranges and valleys where the wet weather is, so where the deer go, where the elk go, natural food sources are moving through. And as you move into the drier parts like Texas, don't stop, but they tend to die off those sightings. There's not as many of them, and it's understandable. There's not a lot of cover out there, is there? And then we have to look at subterraneally. So in the UK, we are completely underrun with tunnels. We're only a small island. And some of those tunnels come up in Turkey or across Europe. And could they be using the tunnel systems? Possibly. I mean, I don't know. They've got to go somewhere to give birth, haven't they? The flesh and blood. Most vulnerable time in a woman's life is when she gives birth. So there must be areas where they're completely safe and feel like they can give birth. And where do they go when they're sick and things like that? So you start looking at seasonal patterns. Is there any pattern I can pick up here? And there just seems to be a seasonal pattern. So the sighting reports will come in the south where it's much, much hotter in the UK. So, and then they kind of follow the season as it, in Scotland, it'll be 6 or 8 weeks later when spring starts. And the sightings seem to follow that pattern, almost as if you've got something moving from the south, north, and then back again, a little like the Appalachian Trail. So you see them follow the food almost. So if they were paranormal, they wouldn't need food, would they? They wouldn't need water, they wouldn't need food. So we wouldn't be getting prints, and we've got them. We wouldn't be getting hair samples, and we've got them. I shouldn't be getting anything in this country that you guys have in America. So I shouldn't be seeing structure, I shouldn't be seeing footprint, and I am. I'm seeing all of that. So I'm thinking, well, that's the same. Is it the same in Europe? So I start looking, and it is the same in Europe. I think these creatures, I not worked at a country yet where we haven't found at least one story in history of a tall, hairy giant that is in the woodlands. I think other than that, it's Hawaii, and they have the mini huna, don't they, the smaller ones that are in the woodlands. But there is always this kind of creature, and it's the same with the dog-like creatures. Every single country on the earth, culture, religion and society have a dog-headed deity. So like Anubis, all the way around the world we do. And we tell our children from day one, don't go in the woods because the wolf will get you, or don't go in the woods because there was one in England called the Basket Lady, and she's like a chimp with long hair and breasts, and she has a basket and she'll steal your children and take them. And that same story I heard of a lady who was a Metish Indian. She lived in Vancouver in Canada. Vancouver's Canada, isn't it? Yeah, and she gave me the same story of the wild lady who had a basket, and if you were a naughty child, she'd come and put you in. So how did they, thousands of miles apart, how did those stories start before we could communicate globally? Just how we got the same story. It absolutely fascinates me. But there's got to be a modicum of truth within it.
Well, that's what we say when we interview people, and we keep hearing the same details described over and over and over on a Bigfoot or a dog man, hearing that, but these people don't know each other from anybody. And they're saying the same things, the same color hair, the same hair length, or it looked like this and it had this, and yeah.
Even the same differences sometimes. When you start, some have like a conical head, we spoke about before. Some are really big, like your Washington State Giants are huge, 10, 11 foot things with like this conical head. But then you move further down south and you hit the skunk ape. That's probably 7 foot, much more muscular, in build, because you adapt to the environment that you're in. So that happens naturally no matter where you live in the world. The animals adapt, and evolution over time changes them. So maybe that shape works for that area better in some way. It's the same for us human beings. But people will say to me, how do you know that people are not lying? So you have to have these tricks, like a police officer, when you ask them certain questions and you see how they answer them. And one of the things I do is I'll basically lie and see if they will correct me. So if somebody said to me, oh, it looked like a caveman, and I'd say, oh, and it had fangs, and they'd be like, no, it didn't have fangs. And you think, right, this guy wants me to understand the truth. So there are differences that these people come out with that you're thinking, hang on a minute, they don't know each other. How are they talking about? Some people describe ears on the side of the head, right, on most things. But others will describe like a baboon-shaped nose rather than this flat human, like the Beast of Seven shoot. So you've got this baboon animal. So you've got people in Thetford Forest speaking about this baboon creature that's grey in colour and stands up on two legs at 7 feet tall. And you've got somebody talking about that in Ohio about the grassman, or in Canada about the Beast of Seven shoot. So even the differences tend to come out when people are explaining to you. I don't know if you guys discuss dogmen and werewolves. I'm not really sure whether you mind me going into that realm. Some people will say that they have hands and paws, ears on top of head, dog-like face, but nothing dog-like, no tail, no dog legs or anything like that. And then others will see them and it's ears on top of head, snout, yeah, but they've got a tail, they've got hands and paws. So you're thinking it's not the same creature, it can't be. Or it's adapted in some way. And then you get the hybridized one, I call it, you see on military defence land. So it's almost like it's been made somehow, like a human soldier almost. A lot of people in the UK describe them as like a minotaur, and I think that's because of the build. Thickly black, muscled thing that tends to walk out from one side of the road across in front of the car, usually on military defence land. They're the areas where we tend to see the army going in and kind of clean up teams and things like that. And you notice that as you go through time. But the most recent one I've touched, and the most touching one I've touched, is a gentleman who lives in a very remote farm yard, just miles in the middle of Bedfordshire, in the middle of fields, beautiful place. He's 88, he's really poorly, really, really sick. And his carer messaged me on the 8th of September and said, look, Debbie, it's not a subject he knows. He's an 88-year-old man, So he's basically got up in the middle of the night to go to the toilet, and he's seen this creature at the window. And he said it had something between a hand and a paw, and it rapped on the window at him. And as you can imagine, he was absolutely terrified about that night. He wanted to know, would it come and get him? So before I knew any of those details, when I rang him, I said to him, don't tell me anything, just let me ask you a few questions. And I said to him, are your parents Irish? And he said, yeah, my mum and dad are Irish, but we moved here, when I was a little boy. Is there a negative property on the land, like an old house or a barn or something? And he said, yeah, just next door, really. There is. It had an awful neighbour in there, and they kind of put like satanic writing inside and everything. And then I said to him, what's happened at home? What's changed at home in the last 24 hours? And he said, well, normally I sleep upstairs, but I can't do the stairs anymore. So they brought me bed downstairs, and the curtains hadn't gone up at the window. So I thought, right, I know what this is. There's a legend, if you're of Irish descent, and he's called Ayatek. And he is the death wolf, as they call him, which sounds absolutely frightening, I know, but bear with me. He will tend to, if you've got Irish heritage, he will tend to show up at times when you're incredibly sick, and for some people, he will walk around the house and keep you safe from any negativity that's around you at the time. Because when we get to the end of our lives, or we're in a position where we're really, really poorly and we're using our brain more than with our body, I think we tap in to another plane. We really can see beyond that veil sometimes. And I just think one of the things that he said to me was, it looked surprised to see him. It looked as surprised to see him as he was to see it. And he said it just tapped on the window at him. He didn't do anything to terrify him, but obviously that's frightening, isn't it? To see him that at 1:30 in the morning when you've just got up to use the bathroom. And I just said to the carer, we need to keep things as light and as bright as possible. Let's not go down the negative route, because things will turn negative if we do that, I said, it's there, it's patrolling that land for some reason. And I think it's to do with this bad house at the side. I think there's a lot of negative energy coming from that house, and I don't know if that's what's attracted it or not. Fortunately, we managed to get prints the next morning. So as soon as he told his carer what had gone on, his carer's gone out and took video of the ground, and there's actually prints there. And there was his Bill, who was his partner, passed away about 2018. And just after Bill passed, they had unusual canine prints on the property. And I think it's connected to them as a couple in some way. But I'll give you some updates on that because it's ongoing. We've got somebody with him. He's there every night with him. And for the past 4 or 5 nights, he's been completely quiet, silent, nothing. So we're hoping to keep it that way if we can. But I have the best job in the world, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No kidding.
I know. But that's just one thing. That's just one case I've worked this week. And I never get up when there's not a new one in my inbox. And that's from all across the world. I've worked with people in Canada who've had their sightings denied because they saw a creature, what they described as a wild man, killing a moose, and nobody would take them seriously. This guy's hunted his entire life. He's a bear guide. And so if he's seen something he can't explain. His name's Randy, and he hunts to feed his family. So it's not like an occupation, not like a hobby. It's something he has to do. So about, I think it was 2015, he went out to hunt at Bear Lake, parked miles and miles away and walked in. And he said, what I usually do, Debbie, is I walk into an area and I sit down and just let everything go quiet. And then once the little critters start moving, then the bigger ones will start moving and then you can hunt. And he's doing exactly that. And he said he's looking out across the muskeg and he just sees this moose just rear up out in the muskeg. He said it's screaming. I've never heard an animal make a noise like that before. Its eyes are rolling and it's doing everything it can to run, but something's weighing it down on the back end. He said, and as it's basically charged past him, there's this creature on the back of it. And he said it looked like a wild man, but it was swatting at the moose with its hand, trying to get its hand underneath this moose's chin. And he said, I'm just stood there transfixed, didn't know what to do. Didn't even lift my rifle up. I'm just staring at this thinking, one of them's going to kill me. Either the moose or that thing is going to kill me. And he said it put its hand underneath its neck and pulled it backwards and the moose ended up on the ground. And he said at that point, his body told him to move. And he said, I just walked out really slowly backwards, didn't make a noise. I got back to the car. I got in the car and I drove until I got to a tarmac road. And when I got to a tarmac road, I just collapsed. I was crying. I just didn't know what to do. So he's gone home and he's spoken to his wife about it. And she's like, everyone's got friends, haven't they? Talk to your hunting friends about it. They might know. Well, they didn't want to know. They didn't want to hunt with him again. Didn't want to talk to him again. Thought he was a bit, mental for seeing these things. But in my eyes, I'm thinking, I could hear the fear in his voice when I was talking to him. And we are still friends to this day. I last spoke to him 2 days ago because it had such an effect on him. And I remember thinking, if he can't report that in America, how many other stories are there out there that we don't know about like that? Because people have felt that they can't discuss it because they'll be ridiculed or something. The man's a bear guide. He's not mistaken a bear for something. He's not mistaken an elk or, if that's terrified him to that extent, then we should be making note of that. We should have him sat down on film and get as much information out of him as we can. And I've never been able to find anyone to go back with him because that's all he wants to do. He wants somebody to go back with him so he can say, this is where I was, this is what happened, this is how big it was. And nobody's ever come forward and said they will. Yeah.
We'll come over and go with him.
Let me get my passport hooked up and I'll...
But honestly, seriously, because I think like me, I think he wants to... I think a lot of them want to go back. They want to see if it, go back to the scene, but they don't want to go back on their own, which is understandable, isn't it? But yeah, one day I'll find someone who'll go back with him. Yeah. Oh, no. I said to him, I'll fly out myself if I have to, and I'll come with you.
You're listening to the Cryptid Creature Show. If you're a fan of the show, go and check out our new Patreon site. You'll get access to our private Discord server, exclusive merchandise, access to all live streams and Q&As, discounts on merch from the Cryptid Creature store, and get a chance to be a guest host during one of the show's recordings. Just go to www.patreon.com/cryptidcreatures1. Thank you for listening and supporting the show.
But
yeah, there you go. Yep. Definitely. We'll make a journey out of this.
Yeah. Ooh, I wouldn't want to see one again.
You don't want to see one again?
No, never. No.
Not
I
from
don't.
far away in a car or anything like that?
No, no, I don't. It's silly, I know, for some people, but no, I don't. I know they're out there. That's enough for me. I don't want to see one again.
Yeah, we've had some people tell us that too, that they would not want to see one again.
Yeah, I spoke to a chap in Idaho, Joe, and he stayed at the Bumblebee campground, and he said that a creature stalked their campground, and it wasn't there for the humans, it was there for the dogs. And he said to me that it was there to take my dogs and kill them, Deborah. Yeah, and he had to fire, just like to make a noise for it to go away. So I was able to get online. I started rummaging, and I found another couple who'd stayed at the same campground 2 years before. They were just slightly north of where he was, and they had a creature that was outside, and it was tormenting the dogs. So you've got validation then, haven't you? You've got, like, at least Joe knows that he's not the only person that's had to go through that in the Bumblebee campground. But I think there are thousands of people out there, thousands of them, that have seen a creature, whatever name we want to give it, that have still not come forward and shared. Sad, really.
Yeah, we believe that wholeheartedly. In fact, we put the question out there every now and then online, and people answer, and then we ask them if they want to come on, and they'll say no. No, they don't want to come on. They don't want to talk about it.
Oh, it is. I know it's hard because I've been through it. I've had so many doors shut in my face. But if you're out there and you're listening, just try and have a chat with the guys in private. If you're not too keen on going public, have a chat with them in private and see how you feel. Because sometimes I'll speak to witnesses and they're not ready. And once we've had a private conversation, they're a bit more relaxed. And then they're like, just keep taping, Deb, because I tape every call just so I can pull all the detail out later on when I'm writing it down. And sometimes they'll be happy about speaking. And from personal experience, when I shared for the first time on camera, it wasn't as frightening as I thought it'd be. And it was life-changing for me. And I'm glad I did it now. I was really worried about doing it beforehand. But once I'd done it, it was like, it was almost like I didn't have to worry about it anymore. I'd shared this, this awful secret kind of thing. I was very ashamed of seeing it. I think that was the biggest thing. Fear, then shame of not being believed, all those things that you want people to believe you, don't you, when you're growing up. But I think now, I'm 56 now. I don't care what anyone. I don't care if people don't believe me. There's nothing you can do about it. It happened. I didn't ask for it to happen, but it did. And I had to navigate it in the only way I knew how, because nobody writes a book, do they, and tells you what to do when you've seen something impossible. So I just think, at least I've turned it into a positive now. And I'm not stuck indoors, frightened of going outside anymore, because I overcame that. I can go anywhere now. It doesn't bother me. And I just think, if I could do that for just even one person by doing this podcast, if one person changes their mind and thinks, you know what, it is time for me to share. I'm going to get in touch with the guys and see, what they think. Then just do it. Just grab it with both hands and run with it.
Yeah, we've been told that, and I love hearing that when people tell us, hey guys, thank you for letting me tell my story. I feel so much better getting that off my chest to you guys. You listen to me. You're not making fun of me. You're not ridiculing me about it. You believe me, and thank you. And it is therapy for him, and that's what we're here for. We want to hear the stories, and we want those people to be able to tell them and feel better about it and not be afraid. And like you said, there's probably thousands that aren't coming forward. I would say for every one that does come forward, there's probably 2 or 3 that don't.
Yeah, I agree. I would agree with that. I would greatly agree with that, because I see that. I'm in a unique position. So I've got people writing into me every day, haven't I? So people will write to me and say, I've struggled with this for years, but I listened to that podcast or I watched this video and I just thought, no, it's time. Not everybody wants to share, but I think I can see more of it now, which is brilliant. And that tends to be across the world. We're getting a lot of European reports are coming in now, finally, because they're able to report to places. You're quite lucky in the US. You have lots of researchers. So there wasn't anybody in the UK when I started. There was nobody. And I don't remember anybody starting anything until about 2010, if I've got to be honest, in the UK. So I was out there on my own an awfully long time. So I didn't realise how many witnesses there are that are out there. But I found others. I found people that have dedicated their lives to it in the same way that I have, you know, because the curiosity overcomes the fear eventually. I think you put enough distance between it and you want answers. That's what it was for me on a personal level. The need for answers overtook the fear, you know, and it was just, I didn't tell. I was married at 18. I never told him. It wasn't something we ever discussed. I hid it. I was really, really ashamed of it. So it was only meeting my second husband. He'd had a UFO experience when he was about 21. And he shared that with me. And I knew then that I could tell him, but I was still reluctant about telling him. But he believed me. He believed me straight away because he knows me, you know, he knows what I'm like. So that was very freeing for me. That gave me permission to not hide. You know, I used to be Debbie Wildman back then, and then I just started coming out my own name, and I just thought, oh, sod this. There's nothing anybody can say to me that's not been said to me before. You know, it's water if it ducks back to me. So I don't mind people firing accusations at me. It doesn't bother. So I thought, well, if I can be a bit of a buffer for the ones that are nervous about coming forward. And then something changed in the UK, and it changed worldwide in about 2017. I don't know what it is, but something happened that year, and the number of reports that started coming in just escalated with everybody. And everyone I was in touch with was saying, actually, yeah, they're coming in thicker and faster. Dogman reports are massively on the increase. UFO reports are massively on the increase. And that's followed at a curve that hasn't dropped. So there's been a change somehow. I'm not sure what that change is. But more, I don't think it's a coincidence that more and more people are coming forward. I think they might be getting ready to disclose something to us. I really do believe that. I think our governments know exactly what's out there. And that's part of the reason in the UK that we're more or less still in lockdown. And we're in 2023 now. And now they're talking about locking us down again in December so that we cannot visit. We're talking about 15-minute cities. So you have to order something online, go into your city centre, pick it up and be out of that city centre in 15 minutes. Why? We're looking at low traffic neighbourhoods where you're not allowed to drive your cars through them anymore. And all of these things have come rolling in since 2017. And I've just started seeing now where they're posting in the woodlands and the beaches that they don't want us there. So it's like, stay away from Wales, you're not allowed in this. What they know, I have no idea, but there's a massive change coming in. You can feel it in the UK. They're going to lock us down again, but they just won't tell us why they keep doing it, you know? And I think it's the same for you guys as well. And for all we feel like we've got our freedom back, I don't think we have. I think there's a lot of places now where hundreds and thousands of people work from home. They're not in the city centres anymore, and the government seem quite happy with that. I mean, I go so far, and people say I'm a conspiracy theorist, but we have people talk about entire kill teams that are going into areas where people are seeing cryptids like dogmen, and the army goes in afterwards and completely clears out the area, and then it's bought, it's posted as private, and you're not allowed on it anymore. And that's happening from the top of the UK to the tip. It's just something strange is going on.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, we've been saying for a while now that there's something coming.
Yeah, it's almost like they've gone for 50, 60 years. They've gone, there are no UFOs, absolutely none. And then they've gone, but look at all these. Yes, there are.
All of a sudden, hey, there they are.
Every movie that's out at the moment for kids has a Bigfoot in it or a Sasquatch in it. It's almost like they're cartoonising it like they do with aliens. And then they'll go, well, okay, yeah, they are out there. And it's mass panic they're worried about, isn't it? You know,
that
mind all over. You won't be able to log, you won't be able to mine, you won't be able to buy a cabin in the wilderness anymore because so many thousands of acres would have to be put away for them, wouldn't it? So they don't want us to know that they're out there. I mean, mass panic will ensue in the UK.
Oh, yeah, that would kill the logging industry in America. That would
most definitely.
You'd have people out there shooting at each other, thinking they were Bigfoots and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly that. You've got all of that.
Yeah, there's that too. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got all the people who are going to bug out when they're because there's a lot of preppers in the UK. Don't get me wrong, that happens all across the world, doesn't it? But they're the type of people who are reporting things because they are living. There's a lot of people living off the grid now because they don't want to be plugged into the society, and I don't blame them. I wish I could afford to not live on the grid. And they're the people who are experiencing things around the property. So almost like we call an habituation. So these long-term things. And like we were talking about Charmaine before, when they start asking in the family, these things maybe have gone on since grandparents' days or great-grandparents' days. So I think we've always had an underlying few that know that they're out there. But I didn't realise just how many those few were. I used to think it was a minority, and it doesn't seem to be a minority at all. I haven't covered an area in the UK that doesn't have a cryptid sighting of one thing or another. And it seems to be the same worldwide, where you get cryptid sightings, you get sightings of UFOs, you get paranormal events, you get missing time and missing people, which is incredibly important. All those seem to go in hand in certain places. Don't know why. It's not really my area of expertise. I don't know how I'd go about proving it, because at the moment, most of my time is spent with witnesses, one-to-one like this, talking to them, finding out what's happened, and then finding the best team to put them with to kind of carry on and go forward. Around that, I'm working with TV companies and people, you know, it's a hot subject. People are really interested in cryptids, they are. And they want to know more. They want as much as they can get. They want TV shows, they want conferences, they want everything. They want the same as the UFO guys get and the paranormal. Why can't we have a cryptid conference? Well, let's do it. Let's get it done. You can do a conference these days as me and you are doing it. Mm-hmm. We don't even have to be in the same building, you know. You could have a load of Americans on one side and a load of Brits on the other side, and we'll all be asking the same questions.
Listeners, be sure to check out Debbie's YouTube channel. What do you call it now, Debbie? You said you changed the name.
I made it really easy for people to find me, so just put Debra Hatswell in. If you put Debra Hatswell in or BBR Investigations, you will find
BBR Investigations. Okay, yeah, look her up, subscribe.
Yeah,
give her
absolutely.
A listen. So, Debbie, thanks again for being here. We appreciate it. We'll let you get out of here.
Yes, thank you so much.
Oh, it's been lovely talking to you. And if you want me back on, just give me a shout.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, stay in touch.
Oh, it's been lovely talking to you, and I'll speak to you all next time then.
Sounds good.
Yes, absolutely.
See you, Debbie.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Man, I really liked having Debra on. It was really, really awesome hearing her encounter and talking to her and about the different things that she does over there in the UK.
Yeah, she's what she does over there is really cool. And I never thought that the UK was so full of cryptids like they are, but man, yeah, she's really bringing them out.
Yeah, so check out BBR Investigations. That's Debra's Facebook page and her group page. It looks like she's on YouTube as well, obviously. So
yeah, check her out. That's fun. She does some really cool stuff.
Want to thank all you guys for being there for us and listening. Appreciate it very much. Couldn't do this without you. Thank you, guys.
We couldn't, man. We appreciate you. Well, we could, but it wouldn't be much fun without you.
Yeah, it'd be pretty quiet out there. Do you want to get to the answer to the trivia question, Brian?
Yes. What was that other event?
The trivia question was, in 1967, the famous Patterson-Gimlin film was filmed. What other cryptid-related incident happened in that same year? Now, this is kind of controversial because people say, well, this wasn't cryptid-related. But it was, because of the story behind it. So do you know the answer, Brian?
Wasn't that the bridge collapse, the Mothman thing? Right?
Yes, the collapsing of the Silver Bridge. You are correct. 1967, this happened in December, right before Christmas time. The Patterson-Gimlin film was October. The Silver Bridge connecting Ohio and West Virginia there at Point Pleasant collapsed, and I think 13 or 14 people died. And before this bridge collapsed, the Mothman was sighted in the area, sighted actually setting on the bridge. And that was the last time they saw him. And after that, the bridge did collapse. So they kind of relate that with the Mothman.
So they say, that's the legend.
All right, it was great hanging out with you, buddy.
Always fun, man. Always learning.
All right, let's take off.
See ya.